Hi, I'm Tamara, and this is TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Hi, everyone. Today I am with Eden Robinson. She is an internationally acclaimed author. And you probably have seen her film Mucking Beach. She wrote the book. It was adapted into a feature film. Her most recent novel is Return of the Trickster. And it's all part of the Trickster trilogy. And she is here. Thank you so much, Eden, for being with us.
My absolute pleasure.
I'm really looking forward to this because there's so many things I want to talk to you about. I mean, this is the third book that you've written in the Trickster trilogy, and let's go back to writing the first book in the Trickster trilogy. Did you know where it was going to end when you were writing that first one?
No, not at all. I was actually writing, when I first started writing, I was writing my trashy band council romance. And I decided to take a break from the manuscript. And my niece and nephew were visiting at that time. It was summer. Because they didn't grow up in the village, when Dad started telling them a trickster story, they really didn't get why it was funny. They thought it was interesting, they thought it was cool that Baba was telling them like a story from, the olden times. But they didn't laugh the way I laughed. There was no context. So I thought, hey, why don't I write a trickster story that will contextualize We Get the Transforming Raven into the modern setting so that they can understand why he's funny. I was trying to write it from Weeget's point of view, but he's a really braggy character. So all the drafts were coming out like if Sherlock Holmes narrated his own stories, that's what it would sound like. So knew that I needed a Watson.
Right.
Sometimes my projects stall out, and one of the stalled projects was Prayers from the Body, a collection of linked short stories about a traditional intertribal dance group that forms and collapses, sort of like the Commitments, but in East Vancouver. And one of the fragments that never went anywhere was a young man coming down and arriving in Vancouver on the Greyhound bus late at night. And it was a very lonely, lonely fragment. And once I put that fragment into the Trickster universe, he became Jared. And once Jared was the narrator, the draft bloomed to 50 pages. And I realized that, it's a novella. At this point in my life, and then once I hit 400, I was like, it's a novel. And the very first manuscript actually began with Jared arriving in Vancouver. And there were a lot of flashbacks to Kitimat. And I tried to solve it by making the chapters go in the last third. So it would go Vancouver, Kitimat, Vancouver, Kitimat, Vancouver, Kitimat. And my first drafts are always a huge mess. I'm not a tidy writer. So I usually don't show it to my editors right away because that scares them.
I was going to say, when you say it's a complete mess, what does that mean to somebody like me? Are you a messy writer? Do you just write everything out? Do you just get it out on paper and deal with everything after? What does that mean?
Okay, well, there's a spectrum of processes. And one of my friends does a lot of outlining. So she outlines her novel, breaks it down into chapters, and then puts in bullet form everything that has to go into that chapter to make the novel work. I am from the vomit method of writing. So you just pour everything onto the page, irregardless of if it's linear, if it's, you just add aliens if aliens come to your mind. It's just, so I write like I cook with abandon, which means that there's a lot of cleanup afterwards. So my rough draft is rough. It's like, it jumps around in time, characters are added or deleted, their names change, their appearances change. I'll throw in whatever I'm obsessed about at the moment. Like, for Trickster Drift, I was really obsessed with Starfish, and I was trying to, like, ram Starfish into the Trickster universe, and it wasn't working. So, so I put it into my X file, and so I do my big restructuring from the rough draft to the first draft. Some people call your rough draft your first draft. It's more of a suggestion of a novel than an actual novel. Yeah, it's gloriously chaotic.
You are obviously a born storyteller, and I'm going to assume that you come from a long line of storytellers. So tell me when did you know you were going to write? When did you know this?
Oh my gosh. Well, I was going to be an astronaut. That was my driving goal. So I took a lot of the sciences, the astronomy club, the chess club, the math club. When we started to get to the upper level math, like once it got really abstract, it didn't make any sense to me. Um, but I learned in grade 10 that NASA had a height limit. You had to be at least 5'3". So I went through the rest of grade 10 really depressed that, I was never going to be an astronaut. I loved horror. I loved science fiction. Um, I just loved reading. Like, I come from a family of readers. And I started writing fan fiction for, like, one of my favorite movies was Scanners. And so I wrote a lot of stories with uh, teenagers who can explode your head with the power of their mind. Angsty teenagers. And one of my English teachers read one of my stories out to the class, and they really liked it. And it was the very first time in my life that I had been considered cool. So that's when I started writing fan fiction.
That was your motivation.
That was my motivation, being cool. It's the currency in high school. Yeah. But my dad is Haisla. My mom is Heiltsuk. I grew up mostly in my dad's community of Kitimat Village, so I was adopted into his clan, the Beaver Clan. And my mother's family is from Bella Bella. A lot of the family moved down to Vancouver following the cannery work in the 70s. So I remember going down to Vancouver every summer and visiting with Gran. And on my dad's side, I remember, like, after dinner, all the adults would gather around the table and they would tell stories. And because we're traditionally an oral storytelling culture, there are some massively talented traditional storytellers. And, when they got around, like, they'd be smoking and drinking coffee, and, there'd be pies or cakes or cookies, and the stories would just go on all night. So, and when you have that many storytellers, they like to one up each other. So when they started telling trickster stories, they'd get wilder and crazier, and they were just really funny. And it was one of my absolute favorite memories of childhood. The Heisler metrics of intelligence are very different from mainstream metrics of intelligence. And one of the metrics is, like, remembering all your genealogy. Traditional and mainstream. Like, traditionally, like, my cousins would be my siblings. So they do things, we do things just differently enough that it gets, in traditional storytelling, there aren't all these asides. Like I have a very hoppy brain. Like, it's like a little monkey that goes, I'll be telling a story, and then I'll go, oh yes, and let me tell you about starfish. Like there's some starfish that can extrude their stomachs into a clam, eat it outside their bodies, and then suck it in when it's dissolved enough. And it has nothing to do with the story, but it's just something that I remembered and
Yeah.
found interesting. And so by Hylas' standards, I'm an okay storyteller. I'm not great. Like I know the difference between me and someone who, like, if you ever saw Richard Wagamese, like, do a reading, I had the pleasure of working with him at Banff, and he memorized his readings. So I watched him. I watched him do it. Like I watched him practicing, and I watched him consulting his notes, and so that he worked really hard at each one of his readings. So when he gave it, it looked like it was natural, like it was just coming from his head. Like that's how good he was, and that to me is more of a traditional oral storyteller. Like that's the kind of work you have to put into it to be at that level of storytelling. So I was inspired to, at least memorize my first page. And it went very badly because it's not how my brain works.
Right. Yeah.
So to me, like if you think of someone like Ivan Coyote or Richard Van Camp, like that to me is, they exemplify the kind of oral storytelling that the Heisler used to do. Like they'd memorize the framework and they would add their own twists, but the essential facts, the essential story would remain the same. Whereas, because I come from a potlatch culture, there's also, we have different levels of storytelling. So you have the formal, the informal, and the casual. So the formal stories are owned. Like they belong to like a clan, a community, an individual, or a family. So those stories, you're just the caretaker. So you're there to pass it from your parents to your children. Like, so they have to remain the same. The language is very formal. And because they're under our Heisler copyright, if I wanted to use any of those stories, I would have to throw a potlatch. And that's an incredibly complicated and difficult thing because, once you start getting into like I have a feast name, which means I can attend the feasts and participate in them. But it's not it's a good name, but it's not big enough for me to throw my own potlatch. So I would have to attach my potlatch to someone else, my potlatch business to someone else's potlatch, which would it's expensive and it requires like UN levels of diplomacy. So I learned all this while I was writing Monkey Beach. So I tend to stick to the informal. Like this is where we get falls, the transforming raven. Like because potlatch cultures are so structured, like there's our nuyum, our handsome way of living. Because the hierarchy is so rigid, like Wiget is the one character, one of the characters that is completely mobile, and he doesn't really listen to the rules. And the trickster stories teach children about our proper way to live by having a character that does the exact opposite. So he's the bad example. So his stories are always like, wacky.
Right.
And then you have the casual stories like, like Auntie Doll went to a wedding in Rupert, and when her and her husband were driving back, she got tired of her girdle. So she took it off and threw it out the window, and it landed on the windshield of a cop car. So those are the levels of like storytelling that I'm familiar with. So, so Monkey Beach was a hard novel to write because I hadn't written a novel before, and it was the first novel set in Kitimat Village. And there were so many issues
Yeah.
around the Haisla being misrepresented in printed matter that I started by approaching my parents. Dad suggested I talk to one of my aunties, who we consider like a culture keeper. So I did, and it was so when I'm working with my living community, um, I'm very careful around the cultural material. Like I think of that as, I'm not the
Mm,
sole proprietor. This is a community. It's not me as an individual. Whereas with the actual
mm,
foibles of the characters, I have complete discretion. Because when we shared our culture before, we had been demonized for it. So, right at the moment, the Haisla have, like, there's some things that are meant for Haisla only, and the rest of it we can share.
right.
So, yeah,
Right.
plus some of the stories, you need so much context for them. The older, formal stories, like
Yeah.
I tend not to go near them, and just stick to the informal and the casual.
Right.
So that was a welcome to
Right.
my TED Talk.
So I yeah, no, and I appreciate that because it what it shows, Eden, is what it shows is that there's a deep respect for the stories, right? There's a deep respect for the culture. There's a deep respect for the elders and the storytelling as a way of sharing history, right? And so I
Yes.
think that is so um, I love that part of it. I didn't know that. So thank you for sharing that because it does give a different perspective of how you write, how you share your stories, how um you know people in your family share the stories, right? Like
Mhm.
there's such deep respect and I love that about it. I want to get into a couple of other questions, but before I do that, we believe that it's really important to show our guests that well, thanking you for being here, and so we ask our
Aw.
guests to choose a charity that is important to them. You have chosen the Dunmore Place Transition House, which provides emergency shelter to women who are fleeing abusive relationships. We will be giving them $500. So
Thank you
Tellus will be giving
guys.
$500 on your behalf. Can you tell me why you chose Dunmore?
We don't have a transition house like in the village yet. It's coming, but they have been like a sanctuary for like some of the women in my family. And I really appreciate the work that they do, especially during the pandemic. And I'm just very grateful that they exist.
Yeah, well, they will get $500 from you, from us.
Oh, thank you
So thank you
guys.
so much. So a couple of things, Eden, I realized that when we were talking about, trickster, that maybe there's some people that don't know what a trickster is.
Oh. Well, specific.
I mean, maybe somebody's listening right now and they're like, I don't know what a trickster is.
Well, on the west coast of British Columbia, the trickster is usually a raven, and tricksters can transform themselves into any living being that they want to. And they usually there's a spectrum of tricksters from benign to malignant. And like I think it's the Niska trickster who's incredibly helpful. He just wants to just see you living your best life. And then there's other tricksters that just want to mess you up. And Wicket is in the messy
Mm,
middle. He's not really He's not good, but he's not evil. He's just a little selfish and lazy. So he's always trying to find shortcuts. Like, there was a mountain that he had to paddle around to get to where he was going every day. So he got bored and like pushed it down so that he could just go straight through it. And it's called Push Down Mountain in Heisla. And, he was always like, trying to scam his way into like more positions of more comfort, or scamming food out of people, or, he was just a crazy character. He wasn't all likable, but he wasn't unlikable. He was complex. And I think that's what drew me to him.
It's interesting because you wrote this third book during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, did you just like you call yourself a messy writer, and you're this, and you vomit everything, and you just put it out, and there it is, and then you go back, and I mean, I feel like I have been, eating potato chips for the last year, and you wrote a book. How does this happen?
Well, I have a particular, like, it's weird now that it's done. Like, my muse is pretty burnt out, and like, I'm used to waking up and then writing, and so I get up and I sit at my computer, and there's no book, so I don't really know what to do with like all the creative energy that I have. And it's quite addictive. I really, really, really enjoy writing. So being like, none of the books that I want to write has landed yet. And by that, I mean, like, when I'm writing a book, it is the first thing I think of when I wake up. And it's the last thing I think of when I go to sleep. Like, it's always on the back burner, if it's not on the front burner. Everything in my life somehow relates to it, or I'll make it relate. I have a lot of obsessive energy. So I wrote the first draft of Return of the Trickster in the before times, and there was no deadline for it. There was no like driving push to finish it. It just myself. So I wrote it at a very leisurely pace, and then, I got a writer in residency in Campbell River at the Haig Brown House, and I was quite thrilled. My mother's father's family comes from Comox, so I saw it as an opportunity to get to know them. And, I've always loved Campbell River. It's a very cool part of Vancouver Island, and I really loved Haig Brown House. So, if you think back to just before the pandemic, like in February, like, I've always been fascinated by coronaviruses. If you have asthma, like, anything that can drown you in your own lung fluid is just fascinating. So, when I started, like, some of the virologists that I was following, were starting to give out these panicked signals that, this could be it. And they were being drowned out by a lot of voices saying, no, it's basically the flu. So Canada Reads was happening at that time, and they have like this crazy 5-day period where you tape everything, you video everything, like, so it's like a month worth of publicity all jammed into 4 days. And so I flew out to Toronto, met my defender, met the other writers, met the other defenders. And then we started this, like, from like 8 a.m. to about 6 p.m, we'd be filming and taping. And afterwards I met my editor, and we talked about, she gave me her notes on the first draft of Return of the Trickster. And because I'd lived with the characters for 10 years, I did not want to do anything bad to them. So everyone was healing, everyone was talking things out. All the trauma was being processed, and Sophia was going around throwing money at everybody's problems. And it was quite a lovely, gentle draft, but a little boring. so 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 I said, "Oh yeah, I get what you're saying." Okay, so I went back to Campbell River, and part of the duties of a writer in residence is class visits. So I was visiting a class, and one of the young women in the class had been to her dentist, and her dentist had gone to a conference earlier that week that turned out to be a super spreader event. So I got a phone call saying that I had, the contact tracer, and I asked if I could go get a test. At that time, they were still like saving the tests for people in the healthcare, and so
Mhm.
I was it was, if you don't know Haig Brown House, it's on a 2-acre lot that's all garden with a park nearby, the river on one side and the highway on the other. I have horrible seasonal allergies. So I was like congested and coughing. And as you know, my hot flashes aren't as regular as they are, but at that point I was going through like a really bad period of hot flashing. So I couldn't tell if I was congested and menopausal or if I had COVID because of the
Oh
temperature
boy.
because the thermometer was completely useless. And she suggested
Yeah.
that, yeah, she suggested that I have someone check in on me once a day, and if I didn't respond, that they were instructed to call the ambulance. So in that mood, like being a hypochondriac and just imagining all the worst case scenarios, like that 2 weeks was the bulk of my rewriting. And in that draft, everybody died. Like on the very last page, like Jared died. He bled out on the ground, and like the last few sentences were like his last thoughts. And yeah, when I got the notes back for that, she's like, "Can not everybody die?"
Oh my gosh.
so for so
Somewhere in the middle, right? Eden, somewhere in the middle of the two drafts. Yeah.
yeah, so well,
Wow.
the residency ended in April, and I took the ferry up from Port Hardy to Prince Rupert. I drove home, hopped by my mom's place to let her know I was back, unloaded into my apartment, and then my cousin started dropping like fresh seafood and just little care packages on my deck. And it was a very different quarantine because I had to quarantine again for 2 weeks. And so
Mhm.
I was in my own apartment. Like I could, people came by like every day, and I could talk to them through the glass. So in this new sort of zone of safety, like that's when I wrote the third draft, and that's the draft that's the bulk of what you see in the book. So it was so the pandemic affected Return of the Trickster quite a lot. and, and I find that the things that
Yeah, it sounds like it.
so I've always found writing very helpful for processing my own anxieties. Like I'm a very anxious person, and I don't know how non-writers deal with the world. Like I don't know how you process the incredible trauma of COVID. Like how do you deal with that if you don't write? Like I just, yeah, I don't, like I've been
Mm.
writing so long, I can't remember what it was like before I wrote. So it's just the way like I
Yeah.
process, yeah, that's the way I process the world.
Tell me, what is next for you? I mean, you've had your writings turn into a TV series. You've had your writings turn into a feature film. You've done so many things.
I think like my body wants a break from writing. Like sitting that much is just, it takes a toll. I have like a lot of other health issues, like rheumatoid arthritis runs down both my families. So I have two types. I have polymyalgia rheumatica and ankylosing spondylitis. So if you've ever had a deep tissue massage, it's kind of like that, where they have to manipulate the muscle to break up the scar tissue. It's quite painful. And then afterwards you have to move
Yes,
it.
it is.
It's like if you've been through knee surgery, it's the same process. Like if your knee has healed the wrong way, they have to break up the stuff and then start all over again. So that's my summer. Like it's all about the knees, and I know it's going to be
your summer
painful.
is healing. Yeah, you're
My
healing,
summer is healing.
right?
And then in the fall, my like I've signed up for a Heisler language intensive. So I'm just gathering vocabulary at this point, and I'm very nervous about it. But most of the people are my age, so they're in the same boat. We're having trouble with pronunciation. We're having trouble with like word retention. It's my mental Mount Everest, and it's something that I've always wanted to like devote my time to, but I've never had the resources to do it before. Like I'm usually working, like I'm adjuncting, I'm going to conferences, I'm doing workshops. So it's like, if you're a writer, you've been in the gig economy since the 90s. That's just the writing, that's just the way the writing works. So now that I have like a moment of calm and a moment where I can focus, and there's no book like coming to me yet, so I'm learning patience. It's really hard for me because I am quite obsessive, so I'm trying to refocus that obsessive tendency to my knees and to the Heisler language. So that's my 2021.
I love you. Like, I really do. Like, what a treat to talk to you and laugh with you and get a glimpse into who you are as a woman, right? And as a storyteller. And I love it. You are, gosh, you're charismatic. So, I mean, you told me, I mean, we do have to wrap up here, but I mean, you told me off before we started recording, you were like, that your family considers you the quiet one.
Yes.
And so listen, when this is all done, I might need to come up to Kitimat Village and have a look at like how loud these Robinsons really are, Because I love it. I love a good belly laugh, and you have given it to me today. So,
thank you. This was such a pleasure.
Thank you. Yes, and I want everyone to know that Eden's novel, Return of the Trickster, is available now. You can get it anywhere that you buy your books. And also, you can go to monkeybeachmovie.com and find out where you can stream the film adaptation of Eden's first novel, Monkey Beach. Eden, you're a gem. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to another episode of TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Be sure to subscribe so you can join us every Tuesday for another conversation. You can also check out our website, telus.com/podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at TELUS Talks.